back to India again, and it's day 4 of our trilogy on the South Asian subcontinent. Now, our series has so far received much attention on the internet, and thousands of people have clicked on the videos and left hundreds of messages. And lots of thumbs up, but also many thumbs down. Our discussion has also been reposted by Indian media, something we did not expect. I must say, a large number of comments were negative and often loaded with hateful speech. Some viewers called us propaganda or even fake news. Now, the Myanmar military chief, Mingwon Hliang, is on an 8-day visit to India and has received what Indian media termed king's treatment. Why does India give such importance to the Myanmar military chief's visit?
Quite understand that the role of military is still very important, especially when it comes to security matter. This is the first point why India is giving such a high treatment to the visiting military chief of Myanmar.
Yeah, Dr. Kipken, hold your second point yet. Let me come to that later. But first of all, Dr. Gao, let me ask your take on this question. And also, it is reported that Indian media, by the Indian media, that India may provide additional military supplies to Myanmar in order to counter China's strategic inroads into Myanmar. What is your take on this?
Well, first of all, India and Myanmar share a long common border, and the two countries have very long-standing relations with each other. So in this sense, I think it's not surprising that the Indian side will give high level of reception to the visiting military chief from Myanmar. However, if India's calculation is based on using Myanmar as a force of deterrence against China, then the Indian calculation may be very much misplaced. Mainly because I think if we look at China-Myanmar relations, it is built on friendship and goodwill, good neighborly relations. And I think the Myanmar's government, the Myanmar's military, the Myanmar's people will not be misguided to be used as a pawn in another country's strategy against China. I believe China-Myanmar friendship and good neighborliness will survive whatever attempts by another country which may want to endear its relations with Myanmar for its own strategic purpose.
Dr. Kipken, what is your take to what Dr. Gao just talked about?
Yeah, I somehow agree with his assessment, but I also would like to add more, not only sharing more than 1,600 kilometers, but there are also people from both sides of the border. For example, the Kukis, the Nagas, the Kachins are settled both in Myanmar as well as in India. As I said earlier, it's not necessarily it's because of sharing border, but there are 2-3 other things as well. The second thing is that some of the Indian insurgent groups of northeast India are based inside Myanmar. Therefore, it is important for the Indian leadership to have a good relation with the military leaders of Myanmar in order to deal with this insurgency problem in their own countries. That's second issue. The other issue is that, as you said in the introduction, it's Act East policy. India is trying to speed up this Act East policy. Therefore, Myanmar is a corridor to Southeast Asian country, ASEAN country. Therefore, it is important for Indian leadership to engage Myanmar.
Yeah.
And the other point being,
Dr. Gao, let me ask Dr. Gao here about this Act East, as it has been mentioned. What do you think are the considerations behind this upgrading of activeness in India's policy towards its ASEAN neighbors? And do you think they have achieved so far more or less what they wanted to achieve?
No, I think from the Chinese perspective, we actually welcome India's attempt to put more emphasis on its relations with countries to its east, namely with ASEAN countries as well as with countries in the south eastern and southwestern a part of China. And I would say countries like China, South Korea, Japan, and all the 10 ASEAN nations would be very happy to engage with India in economic and trade relations. On the other hand, I think we also want to see that India will behave in a responsible manner, especially in dealing with territorial disputes, for example, and also in dealing with very sensitive issues involving the Kingdom of Bhutan. Now, if these sensitive issues can be taken care of, I think we will all benefit from closer economic and trade ties between India on the one side, as well as with ASEAN countries, as well as with countries like China, Japan, and South Korea. We welcome more engagement with India.
Dr. Kipken, what is the Myanmar perception of all of this? I mean, you are originally from Myanmar. What do the Myanmar people feel about India's this latest policy? And also, we know that every country actually is conscious of Myanmar's strategic location is at the confluence of the Indian and Pacific Ocean. So given that China has interest in the Indian Ocean and India has interest in the Pacific Ocean, how could Myanmar leverage its natural advantages?
See, if you look at during the years of pro-democracy movement, China was a staunch supporter of the former military regime of Myanmar, and in the aftermath of 1988 pro-democracy uprising, India was also a strong critic of Myanmar. But what happened after the introduction of Look East policy in the 1990s? India shifted its policy from Look East and now upgraded to Act East policy. And the opinion of the Myanmar people largely is that they would like to have relation with good relation with each neighboring countries. So if you look at the words of Aung San Suu Kyi, who is the state councillor, she often says that we would like to have friendly neighbors, which means in other words, Myanmar is playing a very careful balancing game between India and China. By engaging with India, I do not necessarily believe that Myanmar is going to abandon or Myanmar is going to have a different policy toward China. I think China is also very important. If you look at the investment, China remains the largest investor and the largest trade partner for Myanmar. And India is picking up. I think Myanmar is trying to have a good relation with not just dependent on China, but also turning toward India for economy and other sectors as well.
Dr. Gao, it is reported that for the first time in its history, India may invite 10 ASEAN leaders to join their Republic Day parade next year. How do you look at this unprecedented diplomatic move?
I personally believe such events should be welcomed or even should be encouraged. For India to have better and more friendly relations with the ASEAN countries or with any other country in the world, China has no problem with that. China encourages more peaceful and friendly relations between India and other countries. One point of caution I want to make is that from the Chinese perspective, there is awareness that sometimes India has a point against China in some of its diplomatic maneuvers. And if that is the case, I hope it is not the case, but if that is the case, then China and India should better deal with each other so that better friendly relations will prevail between New Delhi and Beijing, and neither China nor India would need to spend resources in rallying other countries as its partners against the other country.